Today on Dirt Road CRED, we're going to talk about a mystery part that is on our brand new 2026 Mojave, but isn't on all 2026 models. Let's dive into it a little bit deeper and we'll show off just what we're talking about today. So what part are we talking about today? We are talking about this frame reinforcement piece that is right underneath the passenger and driver side of our 2026 Mojave. Now this thing is very interesting because it seems to have come on certain 26s, but not all of them. We just picked this Jeep up about a week and a half ago, and sitting in the lot and inside the showroom right next to it were other 2026 Purple Rains that had no other brackets like this. They had the old style bracket, so if you guys are familiar, back in the year 2022, Jeep did start adding passenger side reinforcement brackets on the passenger side frame of Wranglers and Gladiators. They were more of a Z-shaped object and they were right on the side of the frame. However, in 2026, it seems that at some point or a little bit of a redesign happened and certain frames are getting this. Now, it is not exclusive to the Gladiator, it is also on the 2-door and the 4-door, but it almost seems like whatever frame is picked off of the shelf to build the vehicle is ultimately what is decided on what gets these. Now, what I'm curious about is how this is going to affect any aftermarket modifications. Our friends over at Jim Marsh Jeep in Las Vegas, Nevada, our official Nevada affiliate dealer, was actually doing a lift kit on one, and they said it made it a little bit trickier to do the front lower control arm to remove it. And I think once we take a closer look, we're also going to see that as well. But we wanted to talk about today what this thing looks like it does. We're curious about it, and there really hasn't been any news on it. And then also how it may affect any aftermarket modifications that you're trying to make to the Jeep. Full disclaimer, this is not a video on how to remove any products on your Jeep Gladiator or Wrangler. This is simply inspecting a product on our vehicle, and then we're gonna be putting it right back on. Before we get too far into this video, we gotta give a plug for our brand new merch that we've got laid out on the table here. So I am wearing the gray crew neck with the white DRC and gold, and then we've got the vintage style, which Ryan is going to display right here. Look at that, white DRC, crew neck, comfort colors, vintage style, vintage design, and then we've also got the jacket that everyone's been asking about.
You know, we're on QVC right now.
Yeah. If you go on dirtroadcredmedia.com, typically we have a giveaway running as well. Be sure to visit the website for full details and no purchases necessary, but you can not only help support the channel, pick up some really cool merch, but potentially be entered for a giveaway. So guys, in reality, what we believe this was designed for was to help prevent the front tire from going inside the cab in the event of a collision, at least from what we're being kind of fed across the internet is exactly why this was designed. Now, it is odd that from 2022 till now, it was only placed on the passenger side. And I believe that's because of the front axle disconnect that's over there. So that was more susceptible to cracking in the event of a front end collision, and then maybe having the tire press into the cabin a bit. But I'm a bit curious because we have pulled this off. There is a subframe that goes all the way behind the tub here. And then also on a lot of these Jeeps, you do have the rock rail, and you also have the control arms and all the other brackets here. So I am very curious on why this additional piece was needed. I would say that it's very hard to get to the lower control arm bolt right underneath here. You almost need to pull this off to be able to gain access to it and then reinstall this skid plate afterwards. So from what we can tell, there looks like there is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 bolts. There's actually 2 on the underside of the frame rail, and these are very sturdy bolts. They are a very stout looking bolt. The head is massive, and they do have a flange on most of them, actually all of them. So they are massive heavy duty brackets on this, and they're being bolted in underneath. You can see on here that this piece actually looks like it goes on top here. There's a secondary like alignment stud for both of these, but this is very much so reinforced. Oh, okay, that makes sense. So you can pull all the bolts out, but because it's on those studs, it won't fall. Okay. There it is, Ryan. So obviously there has been some reinforcements and changes to the frame. These nuts are pressed in from the backside. These studs look like they're welded in and they go all the way through. These actually have a nut kind of style on the back there and there. And then you see this little line here, Ryan, from the angle of the light there. If you reach in here, you can actually feel like almost a secondary bracket. So it seems like there's another bracket inside here that is housing those captured nuts from the ones that bolt up like this. So very interesting because the entire frame seems to be reinforced. I'd have to check on the other models, but I don't remember this slug being right here. You see that, Ryan, where my finger is? That's all welded in there. That's a secondary stud. And then up front, this is actually bolted on with those same style 4 bolts right up here that we're used to on the old style ones. So now those are being welded in and they are plated from the backside and completely in there. So a ton of reinforcements have been made to this frame to make this all work and get this all solid up here with this crash bracket. So Ryan just said, what does this weigh? I'd say about 15, 20 pounds. If I had to guesstimate here, it could be more. I could be super strong and it could actually be heavier. But I would say about 15 to 20 pounds. Now this is from the inside of it. So you got to imagine this would be your frame rail side. You can kind of see the inner workings of this thing though too. So we have some welded on spacers here for the underside where those bolts get bracketed. Those bolts get pushed up through. Bolt holes here. 2 here. This actually goes through this entire substructure, which is welded onto this skid plate, welded on here, and then welded onto this bracket as well. This is a very stout piece. I would be very surprised if this went anywhere, and it seems like it would increase the structural rigidity of not only the frame, but of any crash points. So it's just weird. I guess for us, we're so used to the way that the frame looks, and Ryan, you can see how clean this looks without it on there. That's kind of what we're used to seeing with the Jeep. But this thing definitely adds some weight. It would add a little bit more protection up on the underside, and you can tell that it was kind of designed here, Ryan, like on the front to be more of a smooth transition. Like this looks like if it were to hit a rock or something, it would deflect underneath if you were off-roading. And yeah, there's a lot that went into this. So I'm sure the design work of not only this, but also the framework to get this done definitely took a lot of designing. Now it's very interesting too, because look at the size of some of these bolts, Ryan. These were the 2 that went through right here. So these are those bigger ones, and you can see they obviously have to go through a lot of section. These bolts though, Ryan, they're not playing around. That is a massive size reinforcement bolt. There are 7 of these smaller ones and 2 of the bigger ones. Now it is kind of cool too though, because they do align with these studs. I actually figured out why they do that, and it makes a lot of sense. It's so you don't have to like hold this thing up and then try and get it on. They kind of hang on those studs. But what part that it does cover is this lower control arm bolt. So if you were to do a lift kit where you need to remove this lower control arm bolt, I did not have much access. I in fact do not think that you could get this bolt out because it does have to come out this way. If it were the other way around, maybe you could get the nut off and then pull the bolt out through. But actually secondarily as well, the exhaust loop is right behind this too. So you really don't have as much room to kind of play around there. Now, as far as aftermarket modifications are concerned, what we are thinking with this is that if you are looking to do a long arm suspension system where the bracketry goes anywhere on the frame rail, this is definitely going to have to be removed. And that's not a suggestion, that's not us telling you to do it, but with the long arm suspension, all the control arm brackets from factory are cut off typically, and they are normally placed back further. Now, there are some that utilize the factory cross member to do the control arm drop brackets and the long arm brackets. However, a lot of them do utilize the frame rail. The only thing I could see is perhaps manufacturers may start using these threaded in holes as at least a guide or a placement point before you weld them on. So if you're going to put control arm brackets, Ryan, back here, say wrapping underneath this, you would have the ability to almost bolt on the bracket first and then weld it on. So it would give you kind of an alignment piece. The other potential component that I could see kind of being hurt a little bit from this are a lot of the weld-on rock sliders. So a lot of weld-on rock sliders utilize the frame rail to weld on the bracketry. If you're going to use anything up front, once again, that would not work with that factory skid plate crash bracket that we just pulled off. And also, I'm curious about any of the rock rails. So I know like Rock Slide Engineering uses the factory body bolts. So those are right here, Ryan. I don't know, that's the factory body bolt right here. trying to see, this might interfere with that because those tuck all the way under and utilize the factory body bolt to actually tie into. So it's going to take a little bit of time for manufacturers to actually get a closer look of this. We've been working with our manufacturers to kind of send them closer photos of all this just so they can see how it might interact or affect some of their current components. But it's really cool to get a closer look at how all of this mounts up and just get a kind of a feel for what's going on behind there. So if you guys are curious about it, that's kind of what it looks like underneath this. All right, guys, well, let's throw this piece back on. Like I said, it is kind of nice because of those alignment studs, or else I would have to hold this up here. So that just, see that, Ryan? That's actually really cool. So yeah, we're gonna put this back on here. I would have to venture to assume, I mean, I can't even reach in there and get those control arm bolts. I'm wondering if a lot of the current updates to a lot of the Mopar lifts and any other lift manufacturer are gonna have this in the instructions to remove and reinstall to do so, because Ryan, I can't get into there to that. There's no way. I mean, maybe from that angle, but I mean, come on, there's no way we can do that. So we're gonna put all the bolts back in here. I don't know, Ryan, maybe we gotta get, what do you think? We gotta get this thing like powder coated, paint it like a bright color so everyone can see it. Maybe we'll do it like safety orange or something. That would be kind of funny. We're gonna get these bolts underneath. I would not be able to do this without those alignment studs. So I understand why they put that alignment stud and that alignment stud, because it holds the whole thing up. The good news is it looks like if you do have to pull it off to install like a lower control arm bolt or to do maintenance on your Jeep, it can be pulled off and reinstalled pretty simply. It didn't take us that long. You know, obviously torque everything back down to spec, and honestly, the recommendation is probably just don't remove it if you don't have to. Leave that thing there because Jeep decided it was important enough to redesign the frame and install it, so that's probably gonna be what we're gonna do as well. Just leave it on there. Maybe we'll get a powder coated in a bright color so you definitely see it and you can tell that it's a 26, but I'm curious, maybe off-road we'll have to drop it on a rock or something. I mean, it's very stout, it's very secure, and obviously it's below the frame. It should be able to take those kind of things. Until next time, more mods are on the way for our 26 Mojave, but Ryan's behind the camera and I'm here talking to you, and we want you to get out there and earn yours.